Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a turning point for Europe. Spain, Ireland, and Norway announce they'll recognize Palestinian statehood.
The people of Palestine deserve a future filled with hope, a future defined by success instead of suffering, a future at peace.
So what's behind the effort led by Spain? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. It's a move that's been openly considered for a decade in Europe. It comes after months of shuttle diplomacy and public statements, spearheaded by Spain.
Spain has one of the most vibrant pro-Palestinian organizing communities across different cities in the country.
Mohammed Hamarsheh is a Palestinian journalist in Barcelona. He's been following pro-Palestinian organizing there for months.
78% of the Spanish public support recognizing Palestine. And I think a lot of people have seen massive protests coming out in main cities like Barcelona and Madrid, and also university encampments that were following the footsteps of the students' encampments in the US.
The students' demands were met. The University of Barcelona agreed to cut ties with Tel Aviv University and have no other agreements with any Israeli institutions.
Barcelona is a very pro-Palestinian city, and you see Free Palestine in every other corner on the street, little stickers here and there. You go to like public events in the streets and you have everything in Catalan written about the public event, and then Palestine should be free and the genocide. And it's reflected in public discourse in the Catalonian government and Barcelona city government. For example, last year, the Palestinian organizing here managed to push the city to cut its twinship with the city of Tel Aviv. And also the Parliament of Catalonia early last year recognized Israel as an apartheid state following the Amnesty and Human Rights Watch reports.
Like Catalonia, Basque Country is another community that has its own history with the Spanish state and has been on the front lines advocating for Palestinian human rights.
Every time anything happens in Palestine, my nieces and my family and my friends come over and ask me to explain what is really happening. And when I draw the parallel with the Basque Coast, it's even more compelling. But it's compelling in and of itself, without even the parallel. I'm Itxaso Domínguez de Olazábal, and I'm speaking to you from Brussels, Belgium.
Itxaso, welcome to The Take. So let's start with the moment Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced a date for Spain's decision to recognize Palestinian statehood, May 28th. He made his statement in Parliament,
echoing the majority feeling of the Spanish people. Spain will approve in its Council of Ministers the recognition of the State of Palestine.
And he received this loud standing ovation from many parliamentarians. What was your reaction to the news?
Everybody was expecting those news because they've been announcing that for a number of weeks or even months, and recognition of Palestinian state has been on the agenda of the Spanish government for a number of years. They keep promising that one time and again. I'm also not really happy because I think this is a completely insufficient decision, and Spanish government should be doing more to help the Palestinian people.
Can you tell me more about why you said insufficient? Why is this not enough?
Because if you really want to hold Israel accountable for violation of international law and the violation of human rights in a context of genocide in the Gaza Strip, and also intensifying the repression and violence in the West Bank and also inside of Israel, recognition is not going to prevent Israel from doing everything they're doing, at least not for now.
Well, then let's talk about Israel's reaction, because one of the many things that happened on Wednesday was Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich demanding that Israel build a new settlement for every country that recognizes the state of Palestine. settlements that are illegal under international law.
Since October the 7th, Israel's government has accelerated the approval of several illegal settlement projects in occupied East Jerusalem, the first approvals in more than a decade.
And for context, Spain is joining more than 140 other nations around the world who also recognize Palestinian statehood, so that's a lot of settlements. What do you make of the diplomatic fallout from this?
But this is the usual agenda of Israel. Every time there's any hint of support for Palestine, even if it's not meaningful, even if it's not constraining their movements and their systematic violence on the ground against Palestinians, they react as spoiled children, which is what they have become after years and decades of impunity.
What else have you seen diplomatically that's come after this announcement?
I see that other countries are indeed reflecting on following the steps of Spain, Ireland, and Norway. There's also other countries, and the European Union stance says that recognition doesn't make sense until there's a peace agreement and there's negotiations between Israel and Palestinians, which nobody knows when that's going to happen, right? When it comes to the Spanish political arena, because the Palestinian struggle has become so ideologicized, politicized, we see people implying that the Spanish government is supporting Hamas, which is crazy. But we also see Podemos, which is the party most on the left wing, saying that this movement is still indeed insufficient because we should be doing more instead of cutting relationships with Israel, imposing an arms embargo, and forcing Israel to be held accountable at the international level.
So Itxaso, the same day that Spain, Norway, and Ireland made their announcements for statehood and recognition of it, the Israeli military approved the return to 3 West Bank settlements. So when you say that this move is not enough, is that part of what you're talking about?
Indeed. Again, Israel might be overreacting as they always do and threatening Spain with building more settlements or, calling their ambassador. But at the end of the day, they keep doing what they want on the ground, and that's violating international law. And the approval of more settlements is just an example of that, with all impunity.
After the break, the parallels some are drawing between Israel's war on Gaza and an attack on civilians during the Spanish Civil War. So, Itxaso, we've seen big protests all over Spain against Israel's war in Gaza in cities like Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Granada. On an official level, the efforts in Spain to recognize Palestinian statehood predate the war. How did we get to this point?
Spain, or rather Spanish population, has always been considered to be pro-Palestinian or pro-Palestinian human rights, as I like to frame it. There's many reasons for that. We are more progressive than other populations throughout the European Union. We are also more mindful of anti-colonial causes. And I've always felt close to the Palestinian cause because if you're a progressive person in Spain, you understand what's happening in Palestine, or even if you don't understand what's happening in Palestine, you understand what human rights violations means, and you understand how powerful the Palestinian struggle is for internationalists, right? And even if you're not a progressive, I have many friends who are more on the conservative side, but that actually understand that it shouldn't be about ideologies, right? It's human beings being repressed, their freedoms being systematically constrained, and their families being killed or collectively punished. And that's against everything the European Union is supposed to represent, right?
So has this been part of the public conversation for a while? So you mentioned earlier this announcement didn't come as a surprise. Is this something that people are talking about in everyday life?
Yes, I wouldn't say in our day-to-day lives, but every time there's a spike of violence in Palestine, be it a war on Gaza or, also some events in Jerusalem, for example, Sheikh Jarrah in 2021, Spanish people take to the streets and want to demonstrate and protest against Israeli actions and asking our government, and this is what I see on signs and on demands across social media, asking our government to actually do something when it comes to Palestine.
So, Itxaso, you are from Basque Country, which is known for its large pro-Palestinian community. And not too long ago, back in December, we saw hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators form this human mosaic that resembled the Palestinian flag. Guernica is a town in the Basque Country that was bombed by the Nazis in support of Spain's General Francisco Franco during the Spanish Civil War in 1937, and hundreds of civilians were killed.
Pictures from the Basque Republic of the holy city of Guernica, scene of the most terrible air raid our modern history yet can boast. Hundreds were killed here, men, women, and children. 4,000 bombs were dropped out of a blue sky into a hell that raged unchecked for 5 murderous hours.
So today, many people there are drawing parallels between those crimes in Guernica and Israel's war in Gaza. What is your take on that?
So there's two sides to that. First, the Basque people or the Basque cause is pro-Palestinian because we see some parallels about a state repressing the wishes and the self-determination demands of the populations. So the Basque people have always felt close to the Palestinian people, also because of this categorization of terrorism, right? Or this instrumentalization of terrorism that has been used against the Basque people, but also against the Palestinian people. And, I always think about when I was a kid and I went out to the streets on a Friday night, which is when the pro-Basque protests usually took place. I remember seeing Palestinian flags. And for me, they have the same color, but the Palestinian flag and the Basque flag have very similar colors. And for me, I had to ask my mother, what's that? And my mother had to explain to me ever since I was a child, this is a people that has been repressed by a colonizer for decades. And also, this is where Guernica comes in. Guernica was the example of not just the German Nazi regime testing their bombs on a town and, massacring most of the civilians in that town, but also an example of impunity from the international community that would allow Spain to be subject not just to the Franco regime, but also to the German cruelty. And that's still very vivid for all Spanish Republicans and progressive people who remember Guernica as a symbol of what should have never happened.
That's so interesting that you have that vivid memory from being a child and your mother explaining what that flag represented. You mentioned earlier that Spain's announcement was insufficient. So if recognizing Palestine as a state doesn't stop Israel's war in Gaza and its settlement activity in the West Bank, what do you want to see happen next?
I want Spain to cut ties with Israel. I want all European Union countries or all states throughout the planet to cut ties with Israel. I want all countries to join South Africa in the International Court of Justice to support the claim of genocide because this is what's happening on the ground. I want them to also pressure Israel to respect international law through sanctions. I want also Spain to enforce arms embargo, a weapons embargo on Israel, and not just to stop either buying or selling weapons or military equipment to Israel, but also all of these ships with military equipment that are going through Spain. I want Spain not to allow these ships to dock on any kind of Spanish port or ground.
How likely do you think any of that is to happen in the near future?
I'm not sure this is going to happen. I'm sad to see that recognition was a really easy move for the Spanish government to show that they were doing something without actually doing something. I don't want to minimize the symbolic importance of recognition, especially when it comes to a Palestinian people that has felt betrayed for years and decades, but that has also been dehumanized and silenced and forgotten by the international community. So when you see that governments actually side with Israel or they try to be equidistant, but you see that the populations are the ones supporting Palestinians and their human rights, and that the government, and this is the case of the Spanish government, feel compelled to at least do something, I think this is not to be minimized, even if it's not enough.
How are you personally reckoning with all of this? How are you making sense of this?
I think about recognition, and this is something that is also part of the discussion when it comes to policymakers or academics or think tankers, is this obsession that the Spanish government and all European governments have with the so-called two-state solutions.
The two-state solution is the only way out of the generational cycles of violence, retaliation, resentment, hatred, where so many wrongs can never make a right.
Netanyahu is creating so much pain and so much destruction and so much rancor in Gaza and the rest of Palestine that the viability of two-state solution is in serious danger.
Even recognition, when they nowadays speak about recognition, it has to lead to Israelis and Palestinians, negotiating a two-state solution, whereas, the situation in the ground, and again, this is not just about Gaza, this is about the whole of Palestine, is so dire that they should be focusing on making sure that international law is being respected. And once this is happening, maybe we can speak about solutions. And in this case, maybe Palestinians should be deciding what's the solution that they want, not European governments.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Sarí el-Khalili, Khaled Soltan, Sonia Abou-Gad, and Marcos Bartolome, with Manahil Naveed, Tamara Khandaker, and me, Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Waswas. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.